Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're tackling something you've, well, almost certainly bumped into while browsing online. Those sneaky little tricks websites and apps use to kind of nudge you into doing things you didn't really mean to. We're talking about dark patterns in user interface design. Like that moment you accidentally added something to your cart, maybe, or found it way, way harder to cancel a subscription than it was to sign up in the first place.
Exactly. Yeah, we pulled together some really fascinating research that shines a light on just how widespread these manipulative tactics are and the different guises they come in and, the genuine impact they have on us as users. We're going to dissect some specific examples and explore what makes them so, well, effective.
And you, our listener, you've no doubt navigated these digital minefields yourself. Our goal today is really to equip you with the knowledge to recognize these manipulative designs, understand how they work, and ultimately become more savvy in avoiding their traps. So consider this your shortcut to being more informed and empowered online. And a key phrase to keep in mind here is deceptive patterns. That's another term for these dark patterns, coined back in 2010 by a UX designer named Harry Brignall. And it really hits the nail on the head, doesn't it?
It really does. It immediately highlights the intentional aspect. These aren't accidents. They're often very carefully crafted to mislead.
Okay, so let's dive right into it then. Just how often are we actually encountering these dark patterns out in the wild? Is it?
Yeah.
Is it common?
The numbers are quite striking, actually. There was a 2019 study from Princeton and the University of Chicago. They looked at over 11,000 popular e-commerce websites, right? And they discovered that around 10% of them were using these deceptive practices.
Wow, okay, 10%. So 1 in 10 shopping sites is actively trying to, what, pull a fast one?
Pretty much. So even just when you're trying to buy something, there's a significant chance you'll run into one of these.
But I seem to remember seeing some research suggesting it might be even more prevalent in other areas, like apps.
You're absolutely right. There was another 2019 study, this one from Zurich University, and it focused on add-ons within the Google Play Store. And the findings there were, well, even more alarming. They found that a staggering 95% of the add-ons they looked at used dark patterns.
95%? Seriously?
Yep, 95. We're talking about things like practically forcing you to share personal data you'd rather keep private, or automatically signing you up for recurring subscriptions without making it really clear up front.
That's almost everywhere in that context. And it doesn't feel like this is getting any better, does it? It feels like maybe it's getting worse.
Unfortunately, yeah, the trend seems to be going in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
A 2022 report by the European Commission, it revealed that 97% of popular apps used by consumers in the EU displayed dark patterns.
97%?
It really underscores that this isn't some, niche problem. It's a widespread and frankly growing issue in the digital landscape.
Okay, so if these patterns are so clearly harmful to users, why do businesses keep, well, resorting to them? What's the driving force here?
Yeah, it's a good question. The research seemed to point to a couple of key factors. Firstly, there's often this intense pressure on businesses to achieve short-term gains. Boost signups, drive immediate sales, show quick results on a chart somewhere. And it seems that, unfortunately, interfaces that use dark patterns can sometimes be more effective in hitting those immediate goals, even if it completely trashes the user experience in the long run.
Right. So it's like a trade-off where this quick win is prioritized over building, genuine trust and a positive relationship with the user. That just doesn't sound very sustainable.
It's generally not. And the second big factor is simply copycat behavior. The online world is fiercely competitive, right? So if one company sees a competitor using a particular dark pattern and, well, seemingly getting away with it, or even seeing a short-term bump in their numbers, there's a real temptation to just adopt that same tactic to stay competitive, even if it feels ethically, well, pretty dubious. It's kind of like a race to the bottom in terms of user respect.
Yeah, I can see how that could happen. A race to the bottom. That sums it up pretty well. So we have a clearer picture now of how common these dark patterns are, but what's the actual impact, on us, the people using these websites and apps every single day?
The impact is quite broad, and it can be really damaging. One of the biggest consequences is just the erosion of trust in brands. When users feel manipulated by things like hidden fees or being sort of coerced into unwanted actions, it just breeds this sense of betrayal.
Oh, definitely.
And that makes them far less likely to engage with that brand again or, recommend it to friends. trust online is so hard-earned and just so easily lost through these kinds of practices.
Absolutely. I can instantly recall feeling completely misled and, frankly, pretty frustrated by hidden charges or those really sneaky subscription renewals. It definitely leaves a lasting negative impression of the company. Like, you remember that feeling.
Yeah, exactly. And beyond that broken trust, dark patterns also generate a lot of just unnecessary stress and frustration. Think about dealing with the deliberately confusing language or endless pop-up prompts you can't seem to get rid of, or maybe misleading visual designs. These things waste our time and lead to feelings of annoyance, dissatisfaction. It just turns what should be simple online tasks into a frustrating obstacle course.
Yeah. And it's not just a minor annoyance sometimes, is it? I can imagine these patterns could be particularly harmful for certain groups of people.
That's a really, really important point. Our sources definitely highlight that vulnerable groups are disproportionately affected.
Mhm.
So this includes people with maybe lower levels of digital literacy, those with cognitive impairments or disabilities, and also older adults. They might just find it significantly harder to recognize and navigate these manipulative designs.
How so?
Well, for example, someone with a visual impairment might easily miss a disclaimer that's presented in really low contrast text, or um, an unclear prompt might lead an elderly user to unintentionally agree to something they didn't fully understand. These patterns essentially exploit the limitations of those who are often least equipped to deal with them.
That's a really sobering thought, and it really underscores the responsibility that designers have to, well, avoid these tactics. Okay, so we're starting to get the scope of the problem and who it affects most. Let's delve into some concrete examples. Our research from Elegant and UXP2 provides a ton of information here. We can probably group some of these similar techniques together, right? To make it a bit easier to digest.
Definitely, yeah. Let's start with a type of pattern that I think many people find incredibly frustrating, the Roach Motel.
Ah, yes, the old easy to get in, but a lot harder to get out. Classic. Tell us more about how this shows up online.
Right. So this refers to design processes where signing up for something, a service, an account, it's incredibly streamlined, super quick, maybe just a few clicks. But then when you decide you want to cancel that same service or close your account, the process suddenly becomes deliberately convoluted, difficult, confusing. It's designed to trap you in, basically, hoping you'll get so frustrated trying to cancel that you'll just give up and keep paying.
Oh, I've absolutely encountered this. Amazon Prime's cancellation process always springs to mind for me. It feels like you have to click through, I don't know, 5 different screens and confirm your decision multiple times. It's clearly designed to make you second guess yourself.
Exactly.
And what about some gym memberships? The ones that require you to physically go in person or send a registered letter just to cancel? That feels very much in the spirit of a Roach Motel.
Perfect real-world parallels.
Yeah.
And as one of our sources pointedly notes, the more we keep the user from leaving, the more they want to leave. It's a strategy that, it often backfires in the long run, breeds resentment, not loyalty.
Makes perfect sense. Okay, what's the next stop on our tour of these less than user-friendly designs?
Yeah. Let's move on to a category we can call sneaking. This comes in a few different flavors, all designed to kind of get something past you without you fully realizing it. One common tactic is the sneak into basket.
Oh, right. The classic surprise item appearing in your online shopping cart scenario. I've seen that.
Precisely. This happens when items are added to your virtual cart without your clear, explicit consent. You're going through checkout thinking you know what you're buying, and then bam, at the final stage, you notice something extra you never intended to buy.
Yeah, I remember a case, I think it was in the UK, where Sports Direct got called out for automatically adding magazines to customers' online orders. It might not be a huge cost, but it's the principle, right? It's deceptive. You never asked for it.
Exactly. And that 2019 study we mentioned earlier, it found examples like avasflowers.net adding a $3.99 greeting card, even when the user specifically said they didn't want one. Or cellularroutefitter.com pre-checking a box that automatically added a $4.99 screen protector. These small, unexpected charges, they rely on users not meticulously reviewing every single line item before hitting buy.
It just feels so underhanded. Another sneaky tactic I've personally run into is hidden costs.
Yes, this is a big one. This is where unexpected fees or charges are revealed very late in the purchase process, often right at the final payment stage. You go through the whole thing, you think you know the total cost, and then suddenly, just before you click pay, all these extra fees appear out of nowhere.
Ticketmaster is almost infamous for this, isn't it? With their service fees that often get tacked on right before you finalize your ticket purchase. It's incredibly frustrating to get to the very end and then see the price jump significantly.
Very frustrating. The 2019 study also highlighted proflowers.com, disclosing a $2.99 care and handling charge right on the last step of checkout. The design here leverages the fact that you've already invested time and effort. You're less likely to abandon the purchase over what seems like a small extra fee, even though it wasn't transparent from the start.
It's like they're betting on you just clicking through because you're so close to finishing. Ugh. And then there's the hidden subscription, sometimes called forced continuity. This is one that I think really gets under a lot of people's skin.
Absolutely. This is where you're led to believe you're signing up for, say, a one-time purchase or maybe a free trial. But in reality, you're also being enrolled in a recurring subscription, often without very clear, prominent notice. Then before you know it, you start seeing these unexpected charges on your credit card statement.
Yeah, we see this a lot with fitness apps, streaming platforms, even software like Adobe Creative Cloud. They lure you in with a free trial, which then automatically converts to a paid, often annual plan, unless you actively and often quite deliberately cancel before the trial ends. And like we talked about with the Roach Motel, the cancellation itself can sometimes be deliberately difficult.
Exactly. The 2019 research found WSJWine.com not clearly disclosing an $89 recurring subscription unless the user actively clicked on a small, easily overlooked Learn More link. Similarly, Raw.Simons.com had a $95 VIP Rewards Club subscription buried deep within their lengthy terms and conditions. These tactics rely on people just not having the time or energy to read every single word of the fine print.
It all seems to be about intentionally obscuring the important details, doesn't it? Which I guess leads us quite naturally to another category, misdirection.
Right. This is where the design of a website or app deliberately draws your attention to irrelevant details or options, basically to distract you from something that's actually important, or maybe something they don't want you to notice.
Airlines seem to be masters of this. They'll splash these incredibly low base fares all over the place.
Yeah.
But then the significant taxes and baggage fees are often hidden away in smaller print or only revealed much later in the booking flow. Your eye is immediately drawn to the big, attractive, but ultimately incomplete price.
Precisely. It's about strategically manipulating your focus to create a misleading overall impression.
Okay, another sneaky tactic revolves around the actual words they use. Tricky wording or trick questions.
Yes, this involves using language that is intentionally vague or misleading, or even employs confusing structures like double negatives, all to try and trick you into taking an action you didn't actually intend to take.
I recall seeing an example, I think it was from Sky, the UK TV provider, where a checkbox said something like, check this box to opt out. It's a double negative that can very easily confuse people into ticking the box when they actually want to stay opted in, or, the other way around.
Exactly. The 2019 study also found newbalance.co.uk requiring users to tick a box to opt out of something, which just goes against the standard convention, right? Usually you tick a box to opt in. It deliberately plays on our established expectations of how these interface elements normally work.
It feels like they're deliberately trying to trip you up with the wording itself. Then there's a type of pattern that's more directly emotionally manipulative. Confirm shaming.
Ugh, yeah. This is where a website or app uses guilt-inducing language, maybe emotionally charged language, to pressure you into making a particular choice. Usually happens when you're trying to decline an offer or opt out of something, like those pop-ups asking if you want to subscribe to a newsletter or get a discount.
Oh, I know exactly what you mean. Like when you try to decline an email subscription and the button says something awful like, no thanks, I enjoy paying full price.
Yeah,
It's designed to make you feel like you're missing out or making a dumb decision.
exactly. One of our sources mentions a site called MyMedic, selling first aid stuff. They used a pop-up where the option to decline their services was phrased as, no, I'd rather bleed to death.
Wow. That's extreme.
It really is.
Yeah.
A really extreme and, frankly, quite disturbing example of emotional manipulation. The 2019 study also highlighted RadioShack.com using shaming language in the button to dismiss a promotional pop-up.
That's just unpleasant, manipulative and unpleasant. Okay, what's another common one we often encounter?
Nagging is one that I think almost everyone who uses apps and websites regularly has experienced.
Oh, yes, those persistent pop-ups, banners, prompts that just keep appearing and won't seem to go away permanently.
Exactly. These are the repeated interruptions that just disrupt your experience, often without giving you a clear or lasting way to say, no, stop asking. They keep popping up, asking you to enable notifications, read the app, take some other action, even after you've declined multiple times.
Instagram back in 2018 was particularly bad for this, wasn't it? With its relentless notification pop-ups. It felt like every other screen was asking you to enable push notifications, and there wasn't a clear "never ask me again" button anywhere.
It just wears down your resistance over time,
Mm.
and it can be incredibly frustrating, making the whole experience much less enjoyable. Then we have a term that sounds as unpleasant as the practice it describes. Privacy zuckering. Okay,
Well,
tell us more about that one. Sounds ominous.
it involves subtly, or sometimes overtly, manipulating you into sharing more personal data than you originally intended. Or maybe forcing you to take unrelated actions concerning your privacy settings just to proceed with something else you actually want to do. Often happens under the guise of managing your privacy.
Facebook has certainly faced scrutiny over this, right? Like when they asked for phone numbers for two-factor authentication.
Right.
But then apparently use those numbers for other things, like suggesting friends or serving targeted ads. Feels like a bait and switch with your personal info. Exactly. And the 2019 study found examples like therealreal.com requiring users to create a full account even just to browse their products.
Yeah.
Or musiciansfriend.com bundling consent for email promotions within their general terms of use agreement. You're essentially forced to agree to something you might not want just to get basic functionality.
It's all about trying to extract as much data as possible, it seems, even if it involves a bit of deception or coercion. Now, let's move on to the tactics that play on our emotions maybe a bit more directly. Things like emotional manipulation, often using techniques like creating a false sense of urgency or scarcity or social proof.
Yeah, these patterns skillfully leverage our, inherent fear of missing out, FOMO, or our natural tendency to follow the crowd. They nudge us into making quicker decisions, often without really thinking them through properly.
Oh yeah, we've all seen those countdown timers on shopping sites, right? Claiming a special deal ends in the next hour. Then you refresh the page and oops, the timer magically resets. That kind of manufactured urgency is so transparently manipulative once you spot it.
Exactly. One of our sources even mentioned experiencing that exact scenario firsthand on a course booking website. And the 2019 study found justfab.com and lisa.com both using these countdown timers for offers that actually stayed valid long after the timer supposedly ran out.
Deceptive.
Then there's the artificial scarcity tactic, like online travel sites frequently showing only one room left, even if that's not genuinely true. And finally, misleading social proof, like always showing products as being just saved by other users, even if those sales happened ages ago.
It's all about creating this false sense of pressure, isn't it? Pressure to buy before you have a chance to properly consider it. And what about those ads that are deliberately made to look like, normal content or features of a website?
Ah, yes. Those fall under disguised ads. These are ads intentionally designed to blend seamlessly with the regular interface elements, making it difficult for you to tell them apart from genuine content or functionality. The goal is just to trick you into clicking on them, thinking they're part of what you're actually looking for.
Those fake download buttons you sometimes see on less reputable sites, the ones that actually lead to some unrelated ad or worse, malware. That's a classic and pretty dangerous example.
Definitely dangerous. And UXP2 specifically points to Yelp as an example of a platform that has, been known to disguise ads within its search results. Makes it harder to tell what's an organic listing and what's a paid promo.
Yeah, it's a real breach of trust when you can't easily tell the difference. Okay, we briefly touched on bait and switch earlier, but let's just revisit that for a moment.
Right. So this pattern involves promising one specific outcome or benefit to get you to take an action, but then delivering something entirely different or maybe something less desirable. The example we mentioned before, the Windows update triggered when you click a button clearly labeled close. That's a perfect illustration. Total disconnect between expectation and reality.
Yeah, it's a fundamental betrayal of how you expect an interface to behave. Then we have something called interface interference. What's that?
This refers to situations where poor or sometimes deliberately confusing design elements are used to hide crucial information, or maybe to make certain options less prominent and harder to find. Think of using very low contrast text for important disclaimers, maybe, or visually making an opt-out button look disabled when it's actually still clickable.
Okay. Tesla's use of very faint disclaimers about the limitations of their autopilot upgrades could perhaps be seen that way, hiding important info through subtle visual design.
Possibly, yeah. And the 2019 study highlighted greenfingers.com graying out an opt-out option to make it look like a disabled button, even though it was still fully functional.
Sneaky.
It's about strategically manipulating the visual hierarchy, basically, steering you towards their desired action by making the alternatives less noticeable or seemingly unavailable. Another tactic that hinders our ability to make informed choices is price comparison prevention.
How does that work in practice?
This involves deliberately presenting pricing information in a way that makes it difficult, maybe even impossible, for you to compare costs effectively. For instance, mobile phone carriers might display data limits in inconsistent units. Some list data per day, others per month. Makes it really hard to do a direct apples-to-apples comparison of the value you're getting from different plans.
Right, so it basically removes your ability to make an informed decision based on price by making a fair comparison too complicated or impossible. We also have misleading subscription, which sounds like it overlaps with hidden subscription a bit, but maybe it's broader.
Yes, exactly. This category covers pretty much any instance where the recurring nature or the full terms or the associated costs of a subscription are not clearly and transparently disclosed before you sign up. One of our sources mentions Figma, the design software company. Apparently, they added unexpected fees for adding extra team members to a subscription without giving enough upfront notice. Led to surprise charges for users.
So, fundamentally about a lack of transparency regarding ongoing financial commitments. Okay? Then there's a pattern that really seems to abuse the trust we place in services. Friend spam.
Yes. This occurs when an app or service accesses your contact list and then sends out unsolicited messages or invitations to your contacts without your explicit and fully informed consent. Often happens under the guise of helping you connect with your network.
LinkedIn faced huge criticism and even legal action back in 2015 for this, didn't they? Automatically sending connection invites to users' email contacts without really getting permission resulted in a pretty hefty fine.
It did. It's a clear violation of user privacy and trust. Absolutely. Another tactic trying to push users towards spending more is pressured selling.
What does that involve? Sounds pushy.
It is. It includes practices like, say, pre-selecting the more expensive option for you during checkout, or actively and aggressively prompting you to upgrade to a premium version, or ad-related, maybe unnecessary, items to your cart right as you're about to check out. The 2019 study found Topcoat.store displaying a pop-up immediately after a user added an item to their cart, strongly encouraging them to upgrade their purchase right then and there.
It's all about the upsell, trying to maximize profit often without really considering the user's actual needs or budget. And finally, let's touch on infinite scroll. Now, this might initially seem like just a convenient feature for browsing content, right? But our source from Fast Company suggests it can also function as a dark pattern. How so?
That's right. The seemingly endless feeds we encounter on social media, video platforms. They're intentionally designed to keep you engaged and scrolling for as long as possible. There's no natural stopping point, no clear indication of when you've actually reached the end of the available content.
Right. And the article highlights that this design creates what psychologists call variable reinforcement schedules, which is a concept borrowed from behavioral psychology, and it's also linked with addictive behaviors, like those seen with slot machines.
Exactly. The unpredictable nature of when you might encounter something interesting or rewarding just keeps you scrolling, hoping for that next hit of engaging content. It can definitely contribute to compulsive usage patterns.
Yeah, it blurs the line between providing useful content and just encouraging potentially unhealthy levels of engagement, often prioritizing platform metrics over the user's well-being or even efficient use of their time. Wow, that's quite an eye-opening and frankly a little concerning list of manipulative tactics. It's almost overwhelming to realize just how many of these we probably encounter on a regular basis without even fully registering them sometimes. So what's being done about this from a legal standpoint? Is anything happening?
Well, the encouraging news is that, yes, many of these dark patterns are being recognized and addressed legally in various parts of the world. In the European Union, for example, you've got laws like the Unfair Commercial Practices Directive, UCPD, the GDPR, the Digital Services Act, DSA, and the Digital Markets Act, DMA. These all aim to create a fairer, more transparent online environment. Similarly, in the U.S., laws like the FTC Act, the RSCA Act, and the Can-Spam Act provide a legal framework to combat these deceptive online practices.
Okay, so there are actual legal consequences, potentially, for companies using these tactics. Have we seen any real-world examples of companies being held accountable? Fines or anything?
Yes, absolutely. Our research highlights some pretty significant cases and substantial financial penalties. Epic Games, for instance, had to pay a massive $245 million to settle charges over their use of deceptive patterns in Fortnite's payment system, especially concerning kids making in-app purchases.
Wow, $245 million.
Yeah. And the weight loss app Noom, fined $62 million for using deceptive patterns in their subscription and auto-renewal practices, making it really hard for users to cancel. And AT&T was hit with a $105 million penalty for adding unauthorized, often hidden fees to customer phone bills.
Those are certainly significant penalties. Hopefully that serves as a real deterrent for other companies thinking about using these manipulative techniques. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the, well, often shadowy world of dark patterns, what are the key things you'd want our listener to really take away from this discussion?
I think the most crucial thing to remember is that dark patterns aren't just accidental design flaws. They are usually deliberate tactics employed to manipulate you into taking actions that benefit the website or app, often at your expense. And they are far more widespread than many people realize, and they can have a significant negative impact on your online experiences,
Yeah.
eroding trust, causing frustration.
Right. And simply being aware that these patterns exist, just knowing about them, is really the first and maybe the most important step in protecting yourself, isn't it?
Exactly. By becoming familiar with these different techniques, whether it's the Roach Motel cancellation difficulty, the sneak into basket items, or the guilt tripping of confirm shaming, you become a more informed and empowered user. You can start to actively recognize these manipulative practices when you see them in your own online interactions. And then you can make more conscious decisions about how you engage with different websites and apps.
So the next time you find yourself struggling to unsubscribe from an email list or maybe feeling pressured by a website to make a quick decision, just take a moment, step back and consider, hang on, could this be a dark pattern at play here?
Precisely. And that brings us to maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to consider. As these manipulative techniques become increasingly sophisticated, maybe more subtle, and more integrated into our digital lives, what are the long-term implications for our individual autonomy and for our overall trust in the digital world? And maybe what responsibility do both the creators of these interfaces and we as informed consumers have in shaping a more ethical, more transparent online environment for everyone? It's a question that's certainly worth pondering, I think, as you continue to navigate this ever-evolving digital landscape.